I'm very excited today. Joining us today is a pivotal figure in Canadian political history, a career spanning decades in public service. He served as a senior cabinet minister in Alberta, the leader of the opposition, and held key federal portfolios, including Minister of Public Safety, Minister of International Trade, and President of the Treasury Board. Today, he brings a wealth of governance experience, foreign policy acumen, and strategic insight to the table. Welcome to the show, Honorable Stockwell Day.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited for today because, a lot of people didn't hear from you for many years, but you reappeared with videos getting millions of views. Like they're going all across the internet, talking about immigration, Canadian values, Islam, and you're touching on key points that we're all thinking about, and you're actually coming out and speaking it. And so this success across the board, I'm really interested to find out if you have any political ambitions. Are you trying to become the Prime Minister of Canada?
I do have political ambitions, and it is related to the Prime Minister of Canada, which is going to be Pierre Poilievre, is my goal and my aim. So that's my ambition. But even more importantly than that is to make sure that people sense the freedom that they can talk about, believe in, and speak up on small c conservative values, the things that matter most. We're living in a culture of fear where people should be able to speak up, and they're afraid to.
Media has been controlling the conversation now for some time. And it's refreshing to see that Canadians across the country are coming out and voicing their opinions because that's what we need right now. We need people to come out and talk as opposed to being fearful in doing so. So that's why I'm so excited that you are speaking and getting so much attention of late.
Well, thanks for saying that. And actually, I never did really go anywhere in terms of disappearing after politics. I was canceled for a while, for a number of years ago, for speaking up. But I continue to post, and brave media outlets, even now and then, some mainstream ones would have me on this issue of immigration, illegal immigration, invasion immigration. It's just it's making people very upset, and this one just really happened to take off.
Yeah, let's talk about immigration. You use the extraordinary word of invasion in not immigration, and that garnered, is that exactly what we're seeing in Canada?
Well, from the point of view of it is invasive, whether you're talking about a million people or one person coming into your house uninvited, either way you look at it, it's an invasion. And what has triggered it is people are finally starting to realize and wake up as they look at what's happened in Europe. And the event, of course, on that territory in Spain really triggered it. Overwhelming, a nation who has its borders overwhelmed by illegal, I'll call it invasion, because when you're breaking in illegally, you are invading. If that nation does something about it, the nation itself is in peril. We're seeing that in Europe in a number of situations. I don't want to see it in Canada. We have a concerning history of illegals coming in, being violent, and not being deported. And there's even discussion out there about should we be taking maybe thousands of unregistered, undocumented people illegally from Haiti, for instance, who are presently in the United States. So it's an alarm bell that's very real. Invasion is real, and we need to take steps to stop it.
Why is Canada not immediately deporting non-citizens that commit serious crime? I just don't get it.
Well, at the risk of sounding political mercenary, it comes down to votes. I believe that when you have large numbers of people coming in and the government of the day says you're going to be okay, just stick with us, everything's going to be fine, and then making sure those people wind up in large numbers in key constituencies, which means that you can sort of build a coalition in terms of favor for your own party. That's really what is driving this. I mean, Canada's always had a great record as far as legal immigration. That's been our past and our history. But liberal policy, it's actually part and of liberal policy itself to bring in as many as you can, even if they're illegal, even if they're not willing to really, you know, really grasp the things that matter most to Canadians. Bring them in, tell them you won't get deported, get them on a voters list, And I hate to say it, that that's with in many of these cases, that's the driving motive.
You know what? I think this whole thing's going to backfire on the liberals. And the reason I say that is many of these people that are coming to Canada are not assimilating to our Canadian culture. And they're trying to pander to these newcomers that come to the country saying, hey, we're gonna change our culture to be more acceptant of different cultures. But many immigrants and newcomers that are coming that came here for the Canadian way of life, the beautiful parks, the prosperity and everything that Canada has to offer. They're contributing to society. They're looking around saying, you know what, I'm not okay with what is going on.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that. Just on the timing of that, I was just talking with someone who's a third generation immigrant family, and her family had come from Asia. And she was saying how her parents, her grandparents, were the proudest Canadians and are the proudest Canadians that you can ever find. And they're the ones who are most vociferous against illegal immigration and against people who come into our country and commit violence on our streets, willfully disobey our laws. It's you know, some of the third generation way back immigrants who are our fiercest supporters as Canadians. And unfortunately, the new and the trending generation of many, not all, but many that are coming in, don't hold those same values.
Yeah, I believe we have to change that. Part of immigration in the past was we had a certain number. So that number was based on how many people we could house, our hospital system, so that they could come in. I mean, what we've done with the numbers, not only does it affect all Canadian citizens with the services that were provided, and it brought, all sorts of problems with the cost of shelter, cost of living, the inflation that we received. But at the same time, it's not fair to the people that come here because they're put in the same position. They don't have the services that we should be able to provide the people that are here. So it's a problem. And also the assimilation component is, once people assimilate to Canadian culture and Canadian values, that's how we have a strong sovereign country. I thought that's what we were going for.
Well, that was always the original intent, and for decades, that was what happened with immigration. But again, to use the word invasion, now we have the federal liberals, you have the prime minister talking about increasing immigration to increase the population of Canada to 100 million. 100 million to 100 million. We're at about 40 million now. That's not counting the illegals who aren't registered. That's just an astonishing wave that we will not be able to sustain, as you've quite rightly pointed out, not just from the point of view of our own public services, but from the point of view of the values that most Canadians hold dear. And when you see the increasing, anybody can see it. You just look around. Everywhere I go, every city in Canada, and I'm hearing from people who are saying they're concerned. They're concerned about going downtown like they used to. They're concerned about walking in the evening in certain areas. You see these aren't random videos that get posted of violence on our streets that just looks like random violence. And now you just want to shoot that up. The liberals want to shoot that up to 100 million. It would be a total, that level of invasion would bring about a total collapse of our systems.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to fathom that there would be 60 million more Canadians in a short amount of time. Millions of study permits are expiring, and have you seen a plan from the Liberal Party to deal with the issue? It is a big issue.
Well, as with many issues, anything that comes with contravention of the law, not just liberals, large L liberals politically, but philosophically, they don't like dealing with questions of so-called illegality. And just in my life, as I run a consulting business and work with firms, some of whom who do help people come in for student purposes, for learning purposes, but they remind them when they come in, the visas are very clear. You're here for this length of time, as long as you continue to be successful to pass your courses. And then when your visa's up, you go home. And the country that you came from, you're going to be able to make it a better country because you've been schooled not just in Canadian education, but in Canadian values. And the liberals not wanting to aggressively deal with that, it's emblematic of how liberals in general philosophically deal with issues of violation of the rules or violation of the laws. They don't like to deal with it, especially if it could potentially cost them votes.
Isn't that something? Well, I have to say, so what should the conservatives do to be able to sell, like, the vision of what where we could go with this immigration issue in Canada?
Well, the conservatives just have to continue speaking up. Now, when you speak up on immigration issues, even when you handle it in the right context, as you and I have been, mainstream media will torque what you're saying. People are terrified to be called, phobic, to be called racist. I just love when someone calls me racist, and I like to say, you should come and talk to my multiracial grandkids before you open your mouth saying stupid things like that. And it's a way to avoid the discussion. It's a way to avoid um, the debate. Quite frankly, you try and minimize somebody with a slur rather than debating the issue. So Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, they have to continue talking about the program and continue to realize that they will get hit, they will get slurred, but it just gives them another opportunity to make their point. And the other thing is, go into those, and they do actually. Liberals or the Conservatives have been very good at this. Go into those communities, and they do. In the last federal election, I was helping a candidate as I do this at election time, help various candidates, and I knew the folks at the Sikh temple in the area in which this person was running, and they invited us to come in. I got to introduce them, and a woman, because when you go in a Sikh temple, I tell you what, first you have to face the women. They get first shot at you, and they don't fool around. They ask the tough questions. And a woman stood up. The very first question she said to me, she said, "Mr. Day, the Liberals were here yesterday." This is literally what she said in the middle of the campaign. And they told us if our sons get arrested for as little as a traffic fine, that they will be deported from the country by the Conservatives if the Conservatives win. Absolute horrendous, horrific lie. And but that is what the Liberals do, not just on the campaign trail, but in between campaigns. They stoke the fear factor. And so you get Conservatives, whether it's MPs or Conservatives who are just regular folks at work, afraid to speak up. So we've got to, I think we're making progress. You have to bridge that fear. I say speak the truth in love. You don't have to insult people, but hit hard on these elements of debate, and don't be afraid of the slurs. Yes, they hurt. Anybody who ever said, I'd like to find the person who said, "Sticks and stones will, break my bones, but words will never hurt me." No, words hurt. I know that from experience. But you're just going to have to speak up and let people know, let elected representatives know who you're going to be voting for. And it's going to be the people, you're going to vote for the people who respect the country, respect our values, respect our history, and want to see a good future.
Yeah, you hit it bang on, and there's nothing racist about putting Canadians first for a change. I mean, it's time that we put the people of Canada at the front, fair front. I mean, we see 10 cities, we see people suffering. It's time that we take care of our own people. Um, so I want to talk about Muslim values. Mark Carney came out and said that Canadian values are Muslim values. I don't know what he's talking about. Canada was founded on Christian values. It's very confusing. I'd love to hear your take on that.
Sure, he won't define it. And that's one of the things I brought up in one of my presentations last week. If people look at the entire run up to his stepping to the mic and making those remarks, he talked about, before he got to that, he talked about the Palestinian cause. He talked about Gaza in very sympathetic terms. And then he went to Muslim values. And my point is, you're getting things confused. Which values, which Muslim values is he talking about? Look, Muslims are like any group of people. They love their own families, as we all do. Um, but Muslim values, when you look at around, and I'm talking about all the Muslim countries in the world, and the vast majority of Muslims themselves, anytime you do the surveying, some things are clear. Women in Muslim culture are second class. Gays aren't even second class. Gays are at risk of being killed. You do not have full freedom of speech. You can't. I like the fact that people can debate with me about my religion. People can look me in the eye and say they think Jesus Christ is a hoax, and I'm not going to shoot them. I'm not going to ask for their head to be cut off. I'm not going to attack and blow up their house. I'm going to have the debate. I'm going to tell them why I do think Jesus was real, but I'm not going to be threatening to kill them. And these are things that are predominant in the Muslim community worldwide. And so I'm just saying to the Prime Minister, which values, not only which values, Muslim values are Canadian values, but will you have the boldness to say there's certain of those values you don't agree with? He's very quick to attack other people's values, but will you please go down that very long list of concerning beliefs in the Muslim community and say which ones are good or which ones are Canadian and which ones are not? Why won't he do that?
Yeah, I'm just surprised he did that. It would actually, for me, it was like gut wrenching to hear that because growing up, I was born in Canada and it's very confusing what he did. I think this is a good opportunity for you to explain to Canadians what are Canadian values. Maybe five of them would be great.
Well, just look at Canada's history. We are a Judeo Christian in terms of our foundations, going back from 1867 and before that. That is our basic. That's our platform. That's our history, and that means you do allow free debate. You do allow democracy. So freedom of religion, that's actually a Canadian value, and the freedom to express your religion, that's a Canadian value. The freedom to be able to speak the truth without fear, that's a Canadian value. Defending somebody's right to speak to those things, those are Canadian values. They're somewhat unique since they're founded in the Judeo Christian concept, but they are certainly not widespread around the world. And increasingly, those type of values are being diminished, if not outright attacked.
Yeah. So, your version of Canada, do you think that multiculturalism has gone too far?
Yeah, and I never was 100% sure what they were talking about because, I mean, I know sort of the official um, definition. And so people say multicultural. I go, yeah, of course. People can come here from different backgrounds and ways of life. But the very essence of immigration is that you're coming to be a part of and you're coming to be supportive of the pillars of strength and values of a particular country. And I think we need to increase the intensity of asking people that question. It's sort of, it's not, it's mildly done right now and they take an oath, but it's not clearly explained to them and they're not asked, do you support these values? Do you support, it'd be interesting to ask some of the Muslims who are coming in, for instance, do you support freedom of religion? If somebody stands up and says they don't believe in the Quran, if they don't believe in Muhammad, are you going to support their right to say that? Or will you be like happens in other countries where that person can be attacked or worse? So these are the types of values: true freedom of expression, true freedom of religion, to be able to practice and pursue those and to vote in or out of power the people who don't pursue those.
Yeah, this is a perfect opportunity to move to public safety. You are a minister of public safety. And if you were public safety minister today, walk us through what you would do in the first 30 days on the job.
Oh boy. Well, I would do what I did back at the start. I started right away a review of our practices at the border. I would often go to the border. I'd go right into those booths at the border, and I would see what kind of questions are we asking people, and are we being? Is our border strong? I found many areas. We were just starting to do the development, and it continued after I was there, where our borders are very porous, where they're wide open. And the next thing I'd be doing, as I did at the time, was be saying to our Attorney General, for instance, and to our various ministers who have responsibility in that area, if people come here illegally, they must be exited, they must be deported as quickly as possible. There needs to be a change in the structure. Right now, as we famously say, if you can get your tow line on the Canadian border, you're probably good for maybe 7 years, maybe longer, no matter what you've done. That type of thing has to be changed. And now we see it in our courts. And this is the other thing I'd be bringing up: the ability for judges to completely misappropriate constitutional rights and to be able to say, so you get a person who's here illegally, they commit violent crime and maybe sexual crime in a violent way, and they commit that crime, they're found guilty, and you've seen it. It's happening more and more regularly. The judge say, I know he should be deported, but he might go back to a country that's a mean country, not quite as nice as Canada. No, that is a wrong message. You can't let criminals or people who are thinking about crime, you can't let them think that not much will happen if they get caught. This needs to be changed in law. And when people say, well, what about the judges? They can overrule that. In some cases, they can. So this is the other thing people have to think about when they're voting. Why would you be voting for a party that appoints judges that completely disagree with the Canadian fabric as we know it? People need to start thinking seriously about that.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed with the liberals is that it just appears to me that that criminals are treated better than the victims of the crime.
Interesting one, and that's very. Let me give you a really recent example, because and I just published this. I've started, as some people know, a daily podcast. People can find it. Just go to stockwellday.com and they can click it there. And by the way, I'm improving the site. I tried to build my site, and my grandkids are telling me, "Grandpa, good stuff you're saying, but let's improve the site." So it's a site being rebuilt right now. But this just happened. A judge in Nova Scotia, an appeals judge, here was a guy, 29 years old, and he was caught, convicted for being significantly involved in the importation of guns and weapons used in street crime, principally in Toronto and other areas. Convicted, part of a major network. And the judge said, he's kind of young. He was 29 years old. He said he was sorry. Well, we're all sorry when we get caught doing stuff. And so we're just going to send him home. So this is supposedly gun crime is a priority of the federal liberals. But once again, when they have an opportunity to do something on the criminal side, they won't get it done. They won't change the laws so that the judges can't, go around the law in a way. And they'll go after hunters and sport shooters in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Here they had a clear-cut case where they could show the criminal world Canadians don't like the importation of guns used for violence in our street, and the judge sends them home. Wrong message. That type of thing has to be changed.
Yeah, when I saw the reports where, nearly 90% of all violent crime comes from illegal firearms from the United States, and it could be 85 or 90%, and the rest, they scratch the bar off. We know where the weapons are coming from. It's not the
Right.
sport shooter, pop can guns, it's from the US. And so if we want to really tackle that, that's where we need to put our focus on for sure.
Well, here's the
This is
double irony on what you said. What up to the time I was Minister of Public Safety, most Canadians aren't even aware. Our border officers were not allowed to have firearms.
Every border, or most borders in the world, the border officers have firearms. And with an increasingly dangerous crime scene over the last few decades, increasingly dangerous things happening at the borders, when I became Minister of Public Safety, our border officers approached me and said, this is kind of embarrassing. We don't have firearms. When we get approached, when the U.S. tells us, our counterparts on the U.S. side warns us there's dangerous people approaching the border, we have to actually flee our post. The border, our courageous border officers have to flee their post and then call for the local RCMP while somebody goes flying through the border. And I talked to the Prime Minister about that. It was Prime Minister Harper at the time. We both agreed that this is just insanity. And so, for the first time in history, border officers got their firearms. But that's at the same time when the Liberals won't do, or appear not to do, anything about illegal firearms. And as I just said, in the case where you've got someone who's a linchpin in bringing in a vast network of illegal firearms, and the judge says, "No, it's not so serious, just send them home." So liberal policy on this, unfortunately, is completely incoherent.
Yeah, I'm just surprised that most Canadians, they just don't know this information. They only watch what they see on mainstream media, and they're controlling the information. So I'm glad that you brought this to our bring the audience aware of what's going on. I would love to talk about now. This is a fun part of my segment. Is Mark Carney? Mark Carney's been the prime minister for 18 months. I'd like you to grade him from A to F.
You mean like right across the board?
Right across the board. And then I'd like you to explain what the single biggest thing he's gone wrong.
Sure. Well, across the board, because he's small L liberal in his thinking, I disagree with him philosophically on so many issues, the crime issue just being one. So I can't give him a passing grade in general. And one of the single most worrisome things that he's doing, he's drawing us, he's pushing us, he's shoving us closer and closer into the arms of China when the US very clearly has concerns with China. So here we are. And so Canadians will say, well, China doesn't, US doesn't like the China big deal. Well, no, it's a real concern. When now, by the way, I think we should, Canadians should be able to trade with Chinese people. I do believe that. But the fact that China, for instance, supports Russia in the killing of Ukrainians, and we know that China is supportive of Iran, which exports terrorism all around the world. And this is a huge concern, obviously, to Americans, but to our other allies. And the Prime Minister continues to push us more and more into the arms of China. It is very concerning. We know that, for instance, just on the policy of bringing in 49,000 electric vehicles from China, the United States has already said they won't even let those vehicles across the border. So if a Canadian buys one, if they do want to go to the United States, driving their Chinese EV, they're not going to be allowed. So why, it just seems like this policy, and by the way, I disagree with tariff policy vehemently. Tariff policy does not work. So I am not on side with the Americans on their policy there. But to deliberately snub and put ourselves at risk by cozying up to the largest violator of security concerns maybe in the world is just not good policy. And I'd like him to say and tell us why he's doing that.
Yeah, there's only two countries in the world that retaliated against the United States as China and Canada. It's unbelievable looking at it like that.
Yeah, it's a real concern, especially as the whole issue of uh, uh, election interference, and it's coming more and more to the fore. We're hearing it, Chinese election interference, and the spy scandal at NATO. Again, somebody who came through the Canadian system, and when we look at that, it was found that even on this woman's record, there were concerns raised. And the administrative side of the Canadian government said, no problem, just keep her going to NATO, keep her plugged in there. It's unwise, it's unsafe for Canada, and it sure doesn't help in free trade discussions.
No, but I want to hear your actual grade, because after I hear your grade, I got a follow-up question for you.
Well, I would just say a failing grade. So any letter you want to attach to that, I'll let you go ahead and do it.
I'll give you I'll give him an F.
F for fail. Okay, yeah.
Fail.
That's what I got a few times in school when I didn't study.
So the next question is, out of everything, there must be at least one thing he got right. What is that?
Honestly, there have been, and I even post on it from time to time. I do like the fact that, at least on the surface, he appears to understand that the world would benefit from Canadian oil and gas products, liquid natural gas. He appears to understand that. We have said for years, and we wanted to get pipelines through so that our liquid natural gas could get to China, for instance, so that they can reduce the number. Do you know right now in China, there are over 2,000 coal-fired plants in
Yeah.
blueprint stage. That's not just the ones they have now. Just think if the federal government had stood up to the province of Quebec and said, pipelines are that's federal, it's an interprovincial thing, and we are going to get our liquid natural gas to the East Coast so that European countries can have it, so that they don't have to buy it from Putin, so that European countries are funding Putin killing Ukrainians because they need that Russian oil and gas. For years, we could have had those supply lines going across with the best refined product in the world, and liberals and their unfortunate association with the far left environmentalists. We're all concerned about the environment, but the far left environmentalists. Now, there's just a classic case of a policy that has made no sense, and it appears that Mr. Carney may be starting to grasp that because he's working with the Premier of Alberta and other premiers. The test will come when he starts to lose his far left enviro votes, but there would be an example of a policy that I would endorse. But his policies of just taking over every business, his policies, he goes into Vancouver and bails out developers who aren't getting what the price they want on their condos, and so a massive bailout. That type of government involvement, massively nationalizing almost businesses, that's not good for Canada.
No, and I'm glad that you talked about China and emissions and the gas. So I'm a math guy, so I looked at the analysis. Their coal contributes to about 8 billion tons of CO2. And if it were just all of those 2000 plus coal burning power plants were replaced to clean burning natural gas from Canada, that would lower their emissions by half. So 4 billion tons. Canada only represents 700 million tons. So we would be below net zero three to four times just making that decision, because the world's air is all over the place. It doesn't stay in Canada. So if we could lower emissions on other countries around the world, that air will eventually circulate to us. So it's a no-brainer. And we need to start thinking big as opposed to just thinking local to combat this thing.
No question
Um,
about it. Our products are the best refined in the world, and our oil and gas products are ethically derived. They're not coming from countries where that don't care about mining, and they don't care about how you get it out of the ground, and they don't care about the employees. So we've got the best ethically refined and developed products in the world. And it would result, as you've just said, in a reduction of global emissions. But the left, they just scream. They can't understand it. They don't want to see not just, this isn't just Albertans prospering, not just, it's also First Nations. And there are many First Nation groups who like this idea and want to cooperate. They don't get much attention, but this would be beneficial for all. And we get this stubborn refusal to recognize that by mainstream media and by the Liberal Left Party.
Yeah, every single party, left, right, center, we should all back this idea because it's actually an idea that will benefit all humanity across the world. I have a very good question here for you. Is Mark Carney genuinely different kind of liberal from Justin Trudeau, or is he fundamentally the same government, but just a more sophisticated salesman?
Well, he's smarter. I mean, everybody, even the liberals, say that he's much smarter. That was a very awkward and somewhat embarrassing time in Canadian history. But he is a globalist, and he says he is. His book, which he calls Values, he says he is. He does want a banking system that will punitively control people who aren't making the right kind of products, people who philosophically don't go into and abide by a globalist agenda. I am for a world network of strong and prosperous countries which support these types of things that we're talking about, freedom of speech and freedom of religion. But this globalist agenda, which is really, it has its roots in Marxist, in cultural Marxism. Marxism, as you know, says that really there's just a few really smart people around, a few really smart elites. They should control everything. They should make the business decisions. And by the way, if somebody opposes what we want to do as a government, this is how a culturally Marxist liberal thinks, they need to be eliminated. And so, of course, in communist countries, they are physically eliminated, and it's always in the public square. It's always done where people will see. You can go into a town, you only have to shoot a couple of people, and the rest of the town falls into line. And so how does that work in our setting in Canada? Well, I know what it's like to be canceled. I know what it's like to say that Canada is not systemically racist. We have racist goons in Canada, like any country. Canada is not systemically racist. My cancellation, the way I got canceled on that was very swift. A number of boards, because of the attacks they got from the left, said they didn't need me anymore. Okay, fine, I continue on. But that's the type of fear that gets put in place in terms of speaking up for things that matter most. And that is part and parcel how a globalist thinks. That is, in fact, how global liberals think. You cannot allow, cultural Marxism says, you cannot allow dissent. You have to You have to eliminate the dissent. So in Canada, you can't actually shoot somebody, but you can sure cancel them, and it's very painful. We saw it now. We see more and more discussion coming out relative to the COVID agenda. And just recently in the States, and everybody has seen it now, Dr. Fauci has been caught, and some things that have come forward about how he handled himself and the things that he hid. And today I just posted again on my news site, stockwellday.com, another senior official in Fauci's little army pleaded guilty to hiding certain facts about the coronavirus, about the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But that's what happens if you have a culturally Marxist government, which the liberals are, supported by a culturally Marxist mainstream media, which they are. Then cancellation is very important. You challenge the elites, you will get canceled.
Yeah, I totally don't stand for that. I like what Pierre Poilievre says, where he believes that the Canadian people are smarter than the elites. Collectively, we are on the ground. We feel what's going on a daily basis, and we have great solutions. And I completely agree with that statement. You out there are smarter than the elites. Remember that.
Always the case. And it just goes to reason that a whole lot of people thinking about something will almost always come up to a better conclusion than a few elites who eliminate any dissenting view. Um, Look what just happened with, again, another ruling, a court ruling, a judge saying that a person who calls himself homeless, as long as they have a tent, they can claim full social services as if they were living in an apartment. So a tent has now been deemed by a judge, a liberal judge, a tent has been deemed as a principal residence for which you can collect extra levels of social services from
What?
the federal level, and that was just a judicial ruling, and that comes from the federal level, even though it might be affecting people provincially. That comes from having an agenda that is culturally Marxist. And we all believe in helping people who are truly in need. I was Minister of Social Services, and I understood what that meant. But people who should not be receiving massive amounts of government support need to be told that. And some guy can prop up a tent on the street now, and he can get full social services because the judge says, you know what, that's a residence. No, you're just inviting disaster. This
Well, I'm
federal
in shock
liberal,
right now. I've never heard of this
yeah,
before.
you want to
This
check
is
that ruling. It was just recent, just in the last couple of days.
so what we're doing is accepting tents as residents. That's unacceptable.
Well, you add to that, and this was liberal philosophy, we spoke against it, the liberal philosophy of free drugs, of so-called safe sites to shoot up, and then making the paraphernalia to shoot, make that available for free in vending machines. And when we spoke out about that, and I spoke out about that way back, when Vancouver started that down that road, again, the name calling starts. You get called, you're a dinosaur, you don't care about people. And it's painful when you get called those things. And now, unfortunately, those hens are coming home to roost. Finally, in British Columbia, of all places, the premier here, the NDP premier, because he has to step over the disaster he created on the streets of Vancouver. He has to step over every day when he walks in Vancouver. They're finally cranking it back a bit. But this is what I mean by these are culturally Marxist liberal policies. And I say to my fellow Canadians whom I love dearly, don't complain about them. You can't walk down the street without being accosted, or more and more women are telling me they can't walk down most city streets because they're afraid. If you keep voting for the parties that bring these policies into place, then unfortunately, we get what we deserve. So please, I implore Canadians, speak up on these things. But if you're afraid to speak up on them, I understand that. But when you get into that voting booth, please don't keep voting for those policies.
No, like I don't understand how so many Canadians are brainwashed to believe that, this is all normal and this is how it should be. And now we're starting to accept people living in tents as their primary residence. Like that, this just blew my mind. I'm going to look for this.
You want to check it
And
out?
for my audience, I would love to take a look at this.
It's there. A tent now is a bona fide residence. Where you go. Yeah. I'm thinking
Unbelievable.
if I ever stop working, man, that's camping time for me. Now I won't pick a street of Vancouver. I'll pick a beautiful park somewhere. but I'll pitch my tent and I'll file for my social services. Now, for everybody who's going to clip that comment and put it out there, you see the context I'm saying that. It's ridiculous.
Unbelievable. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about Mark Carney and how Canadians voted for a minority government in 2025 and subsequent he ended up with a majority government. I know it's razor thin. There's also some by-elections that he's going to have to win here. So everybody out there, vote for your conservative candidate. Stephen Curran's a great candidate in North Vancouver. Go ahead and vote for him and the other conservatives. But the government acquired a majority. I mean, this doesn't seem like democratic whatsoever. I'd love to hear your thought on this.
Well, walking the floor, as a number of so-called conservatives did, that's an abomination to their own voters. That was wrong. And handing out appointments to get people off the conservative benches, have an honest discussion, have a good election debate to see if you can win a majority. It is tough for conservatives. We shouldn't just be whining and crying, but it is tough. Small C conservatives at election time. When you look at it, you go into the election, let's say federal election, before the election, the undecided historically are anywhere from 6 to 9% of the population. It is that undecided vote that in fact will decide who wins the election. Because undecided people, with all due respect, are people who have a tough time making up their minds about anything. They usually make up their minds on something based on the last person they talked to or heard from. And the last people that undecided people hear from when they're going to vote is the mainstream media, the culturally Marxist leftist media, who always report emotively. It's often the emotion, it's not the factuality, but they will present the Liberal or Mark Carney in one context. Never, they might mention the odd thing that he might have done wrong, but they don't go at it with venom the way they do a conservative. It's just a completely different approach. So that's the feeling that they have, voters have as they go to the polls. They get this sense that liberals must be okay because media kind of like them. But if mainstream media is culturally Marxist and leftist, which they are, the vast majority of them, add to that the main, let's call it the main talking heads in Canadian media, they dream about something, they fantasize about something. It's called a Senate appointment. Because you look back and you look at Senate appointments, the amount that come from media and from the left, it's always in the back of their mind. And I've joked with reporters about this, and some will grudgingly admit it. It's in the back of their mind. Don't be too tough on the prime minister. You might not get that Senate appointment. But if you raise the issues, but not, you just do it subtly, not in that nasty way, you could get the dream of your life, which is a Senate appointment. That's another thing that has to change.
Yeah, and this is a good opportunity to talk about free speech and censorship. The liberals are using their new powers to not make life more affordable in Canada. Nope. They focus all their attention on all these bills like Bill C9, Bill C 22, Bill C8, Bill C, all these bills, which is combating, basically us Canadians talking amongst each other and controlling what people see, hear, and do online, and going after the children online. But there's all sorts of things that they're doing that are very concerning for our freedom of speech. And what it feels like to me is, just like during the COVID time when it's just to go after dissent. So that's why you see liberal supporters out there like, we love these bills because they believe that it's going to go after conservatives for having their opinions. We don't want those opinions online, those evil conservatives. But what they're failing to understand is it's going to affect everybody. And not just conservatives. It's every single Canadian that's going to be affected by these new laws they're doing.
No, quite right. You mentioned Bill C9, and for your viewers and listeners, Bill C9 was brought in, gives the government the power to take certain passages of scripture which are being used like in a ministerial setting. I'm talking about a church minister or a rabbi, and used in a way that the government doesn't like. Bill C9 actually outlaws that, makes that illegal. I was just invited a couple months ago down to the US to speak in one of the state capitals because they said, we didn't believe the government was doing this. This is communism at a high level. Can you come and explain it to us? And I went, tried to explain it to them. But that's horrific. Never in our history. And here we are. We have a constitution which says that we recognize the supremacy of God. Here we have apartment buildings that have lots of scriptures carved into the very base of the apartment buildings. And now you have a government saying, you know what? We're going to decide which verses various ministers or rabbis, or for that matter, imams should be able to read. We'll decide that. Now, add to that just recently, your viewers may not know because it didn't get a lot of publicity, though I posted on it on X, the fact that the military now, at military events, banning prayer. I'm not making this up. It's the
Yeah.
same with the guy who gets the money for the tent. I'm not making this up. Banning prayer at military events, and it specifically says including Remembrance Day. Remembrance Day is going to be very interesting this year because we know there's always a solemn moment. Prayer isn't forced on people, but there's a solemn moment where we prayerfully reflect on the sacrifice that was paid by thousands and thousands of Canadians in various wars. And now the military's been told no, no more prayer at your events. This is astounding. And Canadian mainstream media, virtually silent on it. These are the types of things which, they call it the slow boiling of the frog. Throw a frog into hot water, he'll jump out right away. But just turn up the temperature bit by bit, slowly by slowly, and you'll boil him to death. And Canadians, that's what's happening to you. And we have to jump out of that hot water and start croaking up, not croaking.
Yeah, I have a problem with eliminating prayer in the military. I mean, if we're trying to be a strong sovereign country, when people face potential death, that's the time where you want to band together and pray together, so that you could be strong and wishful, hopeful, and think about each other. And it's very discouraging to see. And hopefully, Canadians wake up and say, no, we don't want to have this type of culture in our military where they ban prayer. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, these are the accumulation of policies, all these things that we've talked about that people just have to think about and realizing we're headed in a very, very wrong direction if we allow not just the policies, but if you keep voting for the people who bring in these policies, then don't be surprised at the grief and at the economic stagnation that it will continue to bring to our country.
I'm looking forward to this next question, Mr. Day. Are you a Pierre Poilievre fan?
I'm a big Pierre Poilievre fan. Some people may not be aware. I'm the guy who brought him to Ottawa when I was running for leader of the Canadian Alliance, which we were blessed to win. Pierre was very significant in our campus outreach across the country, igniting the university vote. He was fantastic. I offered him a job. He took it. And a couple of years after working for me, he realized he was smarter than I am. And he went on to run and get elected in Ottawa, of all places, as people know. So yeah, I'm a big fan. Pierre Poilievre gets it. He understands the issues that are most important to people. He understands what's going to bring prosperity and strong families and strong communities. He really gets it. And the other thing is, now there's a guy who's not afraid to speak up. And media love to take what he says and twist it and torque it and call him all kinds of names because he zeroes in on the truth. But yeah, I am a big Pierre Poilievre fan. And by the way, people who are, and this happens in conservative parties especially, conservatives by nature are individualistic. So we prize individuality. And because of that, we can't think collectively as well as socialists can and liberals. So when the leader says something that maybe wasn't 100% into our ideological stream, we want to punt the guy or punt the woman or start a new party. And we saw, well, it happened to me. I'm not whining or complaining. It just did. You get pounded enough by the mainstream media, then eventually what happens, you get a new conservative leader. Here's the pattern every time. New conservative leader, you get a little bit of a honeymoon bump in the polls. Then the mainstream media realizes, whoa, this guy is saying stuff we don't believe in. And so the attacks start and they go on and on and on. That begins then because people are affected by the media. When they do the polls, you start to drop in the polls individually. And then your own members, whether it's MLAs or MPs, then they start to get a little nervous and eventually say, you know what, we need a new guy or we need a new girl. And look what happened to, Andrew Scheer. Look what happened to Aaron O'Toole. Look what's happening to Pierre Poilievre right now. It's the exact same pattern every time. Mainstream media, culturally Marxist media, portraying the person in a particular light that doesn't come across that well. And then you start dropping in the polls, and then your own members start to get a little antsy, and then you bring in a new leader, and guess what? Same thing's going to happen to her. Wake up, conservatives, stick together and speak the truth in love on these policies. You know you're right. Just stick with them. In the end,
I
we can win it, but you've got to stick with them, not be afraid to speak up.
You know, I completely agree with you, and I'm glad that you shared that with the audience. You know, this whole thing's full circle, so I'm going to have to thank you for bringing Pierre Poilievre on, because without you, obviously, I wouldn't be doing my content that I'm doing today, because I wasn't involved in politics whatsoever. Before I did this, I was a commercial real estate finance guy, and Pierre Poilievre really inspired me with hope, and that's what changed me to be more involved and to be part of the conservative movement. So thank you for bringing him on, because now we're able to talk about the future of Canada together here on this podcast.
Well, as a recovering politician, I'll always take the faint praise, but Pierre's smart enough and accomplished enough. He would have got there without me. I was, happy to be the channel for that, and I continue to support him.
I think that's your politician coming out right there. But yeah, I agree. He's wonderful. So, you know, what's interesting is, you know, the base, they like, he had his, vote to see if he should stay on. He got almost 90%. It's 87.4% support in January. Things haven't changed. What's changed is Mark Carney's been failing one time after another. I can't wait till Friday when we're going to get the release of what exactly he signed with the United States, when he promised up zero tariffs, the absolute best deal in the entire world. You're voting for me because I'm an economic genius, the adult in the room. We're going to find out if that's exactly what happened. And the media's terrified with the loss after loss, him going to Italy during the most crucial time in Canadian history. He's off sipping champagne and wine in Italy, probably on taxpayer expense. And what do? They attack Pierre Poilievre, which has no power. He's doing no negotiations. He's the leader of the opposition. That he shouldn't even be on the airwaves whatsoever. But they attack him specifically because Mark Carney's doing so pitiful in every aspect right now.
Yeah, people need to understand. We talk a lot about, price of groceries, or we talk a lot about inflation. The single greatest cause, there are other factors for sure, but the single greatest cause of inflation is governments spending borrowed money. I'm going to say it again. Governments spending borrowed money reduces the power of your dollar because they've got to keep borrowing it. And you can see what's happening in the bond markets right today. So governments spending borrowed money actually reduces your purchasing power. And that's the single greatest reason you're able to buy less groceries. Your a down payment on a house becomes a mortgage becomes a little more distant. We need to gear ourselves up to this. Every time you hear a politician promising bold new spending or increased spending, just realize your power to purchase groceries has just dropped again. And then what does the government do again? When it becomes tougher and tougher to buy the groceries because of all the taxes and regulations and everything else that goes into the supply chain and agriculture, what does the government do? They say, you know what? We'll open the grocery store then. We'll run the grocery store. I'll tell you, every time I hear a politician talk about food security, I think the more you abandon free markets in terms of making food available for people, the more we're going to lose food security. Folks, if you hear politicians talking about food security and taking over grocery stores, I would say run for cover, because that's a dangerous road.
Yeah, and the worst tax of them all is inflation, because it affects the lower and middle class the most, because the people that own all the assets love inflation. It makes their assets go up in value. So the people that are receiving these peanuts in return, so they're saying, here's your groceries and essential benefit of $1,800 for the lowest family group of family. It gets gobbled up completely by inflation. So you're actually not getting better off, and it's really sad that people get tricked into thinking they're better off, but they're not. If you had 60 seconds alone with Pierre Poilievre tonight, what would you tell him to change right now? Or is everything he's doing gold here?
I'd say, Pierre, you're out there, you're everywhere, you're doing it. Don't be afraid to take a little more time at home with your wonderful wife. beautiful kids. They're the most important thing, so keep an eye on that. And I'm sorry if people haven't been speaking up for you, but the feeling for you is there. So keep speaking up. Look in that camera the way you have. Speak the truth in love. We will get there.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big things that I encourage everybody out there to do is stop being silent. Create a social media account, or at minimum, just share content like this to your fellow Canadians. Say, this was a very good discussion that Mark Nixon and Stockwell Day had today. Take a look at it. I mean, just sharing with one person could actually affect the outcome of the next election in Canada. So don't be silent and start being active in Canadian politics. Um, so we've been on for quite some time. I think that um, I think that was a good. I would love to have you back on. It was such a pleasure and honor to have you onto the show today. And I'm really rooting for you. I love your content, your messaging, because it's getting out there and it's getting eyeballs and it's getting people to just talk about what's going on, and in a way where we want change.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for putting the effort in, because you're, no offense to you, but you're at the time of your life where you could be spending time with your grandchildren and saying, forget this whole thing. I've given up on Canada. But based on what I'm seeing, you're not giving up on this country. In fact, you're stepping up.
Well, thanks for saying that. And I am spending time with my grandkids, and I run stuff by them all the time, especially tech stuff. And my wife's the same way. By the way, I'll shamelessly plug her new book that she's just got out. It's called Grandma's Guide to Raising Kids. Grandma's Guide to Raising Kids by Valerie Day. You can get it on Amazon, and it shows what she thinks about family, and it's pretty good reading, I gotta admit.
Okay, Stockwell, where can people follow you so that they could see all of your daily content? You mentioned your website, but go ahead and mention that. And you're on your Twitter X. I
Sure,
see that
yeah.
you have YouTube.
I'm on X. They can find me there. Or if you just go to stockwellday.com, you'll get the daily newscast. I try and give the insights behind those headlines. And people are telling me they like it. So we're trying to get the site going. And you want to start following now before, we start charging subscribers and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, go to stockwellday.com and check it out there. And it's also on Spotify and YouTube. Stockwell Day-to-Day News, and give me your feedback. I'm getting some pretty good feedback on the site and on the daily podcast.
I think the perfect way to end this, is there something that we should be excited about that you're working on? Because I'm excited. I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I am working on getting Pierre Poilievre elected. And there's a big issue that I'm working on right now. And it's with people who are some of the top minds in academe, working on the ongoing development of amazing remote or home-based education at the highest quality possible, higher inputs than they're going to get. I say this carefully, at public school. Kids are being able to speak up, learn how to think critically. So I'm doing a lot of work with that with various groups around the country who are really bringing the ability to educate oneself and with others in the community through remote education is a project that I'm very excited about. And one that I can't tell you about now, but I'm going to give you the precursor on it, and it has to do with a really exciting First Nations project, and you'll hear about it in the future.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you to come on the show, and thank you.
All right. Thanks for the good work you're doing.